The Coca-Cola splashed across his frail shoulders, soaking into the old brown jacket he had worn for years. The sticky liquid dripped down onto the cracked pavement, glistening under the cruel sunlight. Around him, laughter echoed, loud, careless, and cruel. The group of young men, all in their late teens, couldn't stop chuckling as they recorded the moment on their phones. "Look at him flinch," one said between bursts of laughter, while another tilted the bottle again, letting the soda run down the elderly man's neck. The old woman beside him tried to wipe it away with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears she couldn't hold back any longer. On the side of the road, a little girl, no more than 7, cried uncontrollably, her voice cracking as she pleaded for them to stop. But the laughter only grew louder, bouncing off the walls of the quiet street like a cruel soundtrack to human apathy. If you believe that kindness, second chances, and respect still matter in this world, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes, where we keep humanity alive through powerful true-to-life stories that touch the soul. The elderly couple's names were Harold and May Thompson. They had been married for 53 years, two people who had seen the world change in ways they could barely understand anymore. Harold had been a carpenter for most of his life, building homes with steady hands that could once turn raw wood into art. May had been a schoolteacher, patient and gentle, the kind of woman who stayed after class just to help a child struggling with words. They had lived quietly in a small suburban neighborhood where everyone once waved when they passed. But times had changed. People had become busier, colder, and more disconnected. The world that once felt like home now felt like a place they no longer belonged to. That afternoon, they were returning from the local grocery store, walking slowly, Harold leaning on his cane and May clutching a small bag of bread, milk, and a can of soup. The sun was harsh, and they decided to sit for a while on the curb to rest. That's when the boys appeared, a group of restless teens, loud, laughing, and looking for amusement. When their eyes landed on Harold and May, the laughter turned sharper. "Let's record this," one of them said, holding up his phone. "Make it go viral." Harold had looked up, startled but polite. "Please, son, we mean no harm," he'd said softly. His voice was calm, almost pleading, the kind of tone that once could have reached someone's conscience. But kindness doesn't always reach hardened hearts. The boy in the black t-shirt, cap turned backward, shook a Coke bottle violently and grinned. Then, without hesitation, he poured it over Harold's head. The sound of the liquid fizzing against the old man's jacket was drowned out by their laughter. Another boy filmed from up close, zooming in as May tried desperately to wipe the sticky liquid from her husband's face, whispering, "It's okay, Harold. It's okay." But her words trembled. She was crying. A few feet away, Laya, a little girl from the neighborhood, watched in horror. She was only 7, visiting her grandparents next door. Her small hands clutched her doll tightly as her eyes filled with tears. Then, unable to take it anymore, she dropped the doll and ran forward. "Stop. Please stop," she cried, standing in front of the couple, spreading her arms as if her tiny frame could shield them. Her voice broke with every word. "They didn't do anything." The boys hesitated for just a moment. Then one of them laughed again, cruel and heartless. "Look at that. The little hero's crying," he said, pointing his phone toward her. The others joined in, amused by the sight of the sobbing child. But none of them noticed the figure walking slowly toward them in the distance. Ethan Thompson, Harold and May's only son, had just returned home after a long deployment overseas. A Navy SEAL for more than a decade, he had seen war, real war. He had seen cities burn, comrades fall, and families torn apart. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for what he saw that day. He had planned to surprise his parents, to walk up the front porch and knock on the same door he'd left 2 years ago. He still wore his camouflage uniform, the desert dust clinging to his boots, when he turned the corner and saw a crowd. At first, he thought it was just a group of kids hanging around. But as he drew closer, his heart stopped. There, on the curb, sat his father and mother, drenched, humiliated, and trembling. His father's once steady hands shook uncontrollably. His mother's soft eyes, the same eyes that had smiled through every letter he'd sent from war, were now red with tears. Around them stood a group of teenagers, laughing, filming, pointing. For a moment, Ethan couldn't move. It felt like the world narrowed into a tunnel, all sound fading except the pounding of his heart. Then, slowly, he began to walk forward. His boots struck the pavement with heavy, measured steps. The sunlight reflected off his metal tags, catching the attention of one of the boys. The laughter stopped first, fading into nervous whispers. The boy holding the Coke bottle froze mid-smirk. Ethan didn't have to yell. He didn't have to threaten. His very presence, tall, broad-shouldered, uniformed, eyes hard as steel, commanded silence. "What's funny?" he asked, his voice low, but sharp enough to cut through their fear. No one answered. The boy with the bottle dropped it, the last of the soda fizzing at his feet. Ethan walked right past them and knelt beside his parents. He gently took his father's trembling hand, sticky with soda, and whispered, "Dad, it's me." For a moment, Harold just stared, blinking through tears. Then his lips trembled. "You came home," he whispered weakly. May let out a sound that was half a cry, half a prayer. She reached for her son's arm as if afraid he might disappear. The bullies started to back away, but Ethan rose slowly to his feet. "You think this is funny?" he asked, turning toward them. His voice didn't shake, but it carried the weight of everything he'd seen, not just as a soldier, but as a son. "That's my mother and father. They built this country while you record your cruelty for likes." He looked at each of them in turn, eyes blazing not with rage, but with something worse, disappointment. "You don't humiliate people to feel strong. Real strength is protecting those who can't fight back." The boys couldn't meet his gaze. One of them, the one in the cap, finally muttered, "We were just joking." Ethan took a step closer. "Cruelty isn't a joke," he said softly. "You'll remember this day, not because it went viral, but because you'll realize one day what kind of person you were, and what you could have been instead." The street was silent. Leah still stood near May, her small hands clutching the hem of the old woman's skirt. May gently pulled her close and kissed her forehead. Ethan turned back to his parents, helping them both to their feet. "Let's go home, Dad," he said quietly. "No shouting, no revenge, just dignity, the kind that speaks louder than anger ever could." As they walked down the street together, an old couple leaning on their son, a soldier who had seen war but still believed in peace, the bullies stood frozen, their laughter long gone. The camera phones hung useless in their hands. And for the first time, they looked ashamed. Later that evening, the sky turned shades of gold and crimson. Harold sat on the porch, leaning gently against his son's shoulder. May sat beside them, holding Leah's little hand. No one spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't heavy, it was healing. The breeze carried the faint sound of children playing somewhere down the street, and for the first time in a long while, Harold smiled faintly. Ethan stared at the horizon, his thoughts quiet. He realized that not every battle was fought on distant soil. Some of the most important ones happened right here, on the streets we walk, in the choices we make, in the moments when we decide to stand up instead of staying silent. Before we move to the ending, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you saw something like this happening? Would you have stepped in? Would you have spoken up? Because sometimes, heroes aren't just soldiers in uniform. Sometimes, they're little girls who cry for kindness, or elderly couples who endure cruelty with grace, or strangers who choose to act when everyone else looks away. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes. Let's remind the world that compassion still wins, even in the face of cruelty. Because in the end, the greatest strength isn't power. It's kindness.